The bridge of the Galactic Survey vessel. Harmonious dawn buzzed with quiet activity. Captain Zexhai adjusted his position in the command chair, his blue-scaled hands dancing across the control panel. The Volanti captain had been exploring this sector for 3 months without finding anything more interesting than empty space and dead rocks. "Captain," called Science Officer Krinta from her station, "I'm picking up something unusual on the long-range sensors." Zexhai's head turned toward her, his large black eyes reflecting the dim lighting of the bridge. "Define unusual, officer." "Unknown." "Vessel, sir. It appears to be drifting near the edge of the Kepler 442 system. No response to standard hails." Krinta's fingers moved quickly over her console. "Running a classification scan now." The bridge crew leaned forward with interest. Finding derelict ships was uncommon but not unheard of. Usually they belonged to one of the known spacefaring species, Volanti, Zephyrians, or the insect-like Kreks. Standard salvage protocols would apply, and they could tow the vessel to the nearest station for proper identification. "Scan complete, Captain," Krinta announced, but her voice carried a strange tone that made everyone stop what they were doing. "Sir, the computer is having trouble with the classification." "What do you mean, trouble?" Zexhai stood up from his chair. "The design doesn't match anything in our database. The materials, the construction methods, even the basic engineering. Principles are completely foreign." Krinta paused, her violet skin paling slightly. "Captain, the computer has assigned it a Class 15 Deathworld rating." The bridge fell completely silent. Even the soft humming of the ship's systems seemed to quiet down. Class 15 was theoretical. It was the rating given to worlds so hostile that no known species could possibly evolve there, let alone develop space. "Travel. Run the scan again," Zexhai ordered, his voice tight. "I've run it 3 times, sir. Same result each time." Krinta looked up from her station. "Captain, there's something else. I'm detecting life signs aboard the vessel." "Communications." Officer Velran nearly dropped his stylus. "Life signs on a Class 15 Deathworld ship?" 17 distinct biological signatures, Krinta confirmed. "And sir, these readings are impossible. The bone density measurements are off the charts. Their muscle mass ratios don't make sense. Their cardiovascular systems are running at efficiency, levels that should kill them." Zexhai felt a chill run through his scales. Throughout galactic history, the highest classification ever encountered was Class 9, and those species were considered extremely dangerous. The Kreks, with their natural armor and acidic blood, were Class 7. The Zephyrians, who could survive in near-vacuum conditions, were Class 8. But Class 15 was beyond comprehension. "Could they be wearing some kind of enhancement suits?" asked Navigation Officer Tolway. "Negative," Krinta replied. "These appear to be natural biological readings. Whatever species this is, they evolved on a world that makes our most hostile environments look like vacation resorts." Zexhai paced behind his chair, his tail swishing with nervous energy. Protocol was clear in situations like this. Unknown. Species with potential hostility ratings above Class 10 required immediate contact with Galactic Command. They should maintain distance and wait for a military response team. But the ship was drifting. If these beings were in distress, abandoning them could be seen as a violation of galactic rescue protocols. And if they were truly from a Class 15 world, they might possess technology that could benefit all galactic civilization. "Captain," Velran spoke up from his station, "I'm receiving a signal from the unknown vessel." "What kind of signal?" "Audio. Transmission, sir. It's being broadcast on multiple frequencies." Velran adjusted his controls. "The signal appears to be music?" "Music?" Zexhai's confusion was evident in his voice. "Yes, sir. Rhythmic audio patterns with melodic structures. Very complex arrangements. Should I put it through the speakers?" Zexhai nodded, and the bridge, filled with sounds unlike anything they had ever heard. The music was energetic, with driving beats and what sounded like multiple voices singing in harmony. It was strangely appealing despite being completely alien. "This doesn't sound like a distress signal," Tolway observed. "No," Zexhai agreed. "It sounds like a celebration." Krinta ran more scans while the music played. "Captain, I'm detecting no weapon signatures from the vessel. Their power output is consistent with civilian operations. Whatever they're doing over there, it doesn't appear to be military in nature. The music continued for several more minutes before cutting off. Immediately afterward, Velran received a new transmission. "Captain, they're hailing us, audio only. Put them through." The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything in the galactic database. It was warm, friendly, and spoke in a language that the universal translator struggled to process. "Hello there, unknown vessel. This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Phoenix. We noticed you running scans on us and figured we should introduce ourselves. We're not in any immediate danger, just dealing with some engine trouble. Are you folks part of some kind of galactic patrol? We'd love to chat if you have the time." The casual, friendly tone of the transmission caught everyone off guard. This wasn't how dangerous Deathworld species were supposed to communicate. Where were the threats, the demands, the warnings to stay away? "Shall I respond, Captain?" Velran asked. Zexai considered his options. Everything about this situation violated standard protocols, but the beings on the other ship seemed friendly, even welcoming, and they had identified themselves as being from someplace called Earth. Open a channel, he decided. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Zexai of the Galactic survey ship Harmonious Dawn. We are conducting routine surveys in this sector and detected your vessel. Are you in need of assistance?" The response came quickly. "Well, Captain Zexai, that's mighty kind of you to offer. We've got our engines running again, but we could use some help with our navigation systems. More importantly, we'd be thrilled to meet representatives of galactic civilization. This is our first time this far from home, and we're eager to learn about our neighbors." The enthusiasm in the human's voice was infectious, but also deeply unsettling. Beings from Class 15 Deathworlds shouldn't sound so happy about meeting strangers. "Captain," Krinta whispered, "recommend extreme caution. We have no idea what we're dealing with." But Zexai found himself curious despite the warnings. Against all protocols and common sense, he made a decision that would change galactic history forever. "Commander Morrison, this is Captain Zexai. We would be honored to meet with you and your crew, requesting permission to dock with your vessel." "Permission granted, Captain. We'll roll out the welcome mat. Looking forward to meeting you folks." As the Harmonious Dawn moved closer to the mysterious ship, Zexai wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his career or the most important discovery in galactic history. The airlock between the two ships sealed with a soft hiss. Captain Zexai checked his breathing apparatus one final time before stepping into the unknown vessel. Behind him, Science Officer Krinta and Communications Officer Velran followed, closely, their scanning equipment ready. What greeted them on the other side defied every expectation they had formed about Deathworld ships. The corridor was bright and welcoming, with soft lighting that seemed designed for comfort rather than efficiency. Along the walls, green plants grew in carefully maintained containers. The air carried scents that their universal translators identified as pleasant organic compounds. This looked nothing like the harsh militaristic environment they had expected from beings who could survive Class 15 conditions. "Welcome aboard the UES Phoenix." A figure approached them from down the corridor, and Zexai had to fight the urge to step backward. The being was tall, much taller than any Volanti, with pale skin and brown hair covering the top of its head. Its frame looked solid and powerful, but its expression was warm and friendly. "I'm Commander Jake Morrison," the human said, extending one of his upper limbs toward them. "You folks look like you might be new to human customs. This is called a handshake. It's how we greet new friends." Krinta's scanner was going wild in her hands, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "Commander, we appreciate your hospitality. I am Science Officer Krinta, and this is Captain Zexai and Communications Officer Velran." Jake's smile grew wider. "Great to meet you all. I have to say this is exciting for us. We've been hoping to run into other spacefaring species ever since we left Earth. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Water? We might have some tea somewhere." The casual offer caught them completely off guard. Zexai managed to find his voice. "That is very kind, Commander Morrison. We would be grateful for whatever you can provide." "Jake, please. We're pretty informal around here." He gestured for them to follow him down the corridor. "I hope you Don't mind if we take a little tour on the way to the galley. The crew is excited to meet you, and I thought you might be interested in seeing how we do things. As they walked, HFY noticed details that made his scales prickle with unease. The walls were thick, designed to withstand pressures that would crush most galactic vessels. The flooring had a texture that provided grip far beyond what any known species would need. Everything was built to handle forces that shouldn't exist outside of planetary gravity wells. They passed what Jake identified as a gymnasium, and Velran nearly dropped his translator device. Through the transparent walls, they could see several humans engaged in activities that looked like combat training. One female was lifting metal weights that had to mass more than the entire Volanti contact team combined. Two males were engaged in what appeared to be a form of ritualized violence, striking each other with padded limbs while moving at speeds that hurt to watch. That's our fitness center, Jake explained cheerfully. Gotta stay in shape, you know? Long space flights can be rough on the body if you don't keep up with your exercise routine. Krinta stared at the readouts on her scanner. The female lifting weights was generating force measurements that exceeded the structural limits of most galactic space stations. Commander, Jake, that is a normal exercise routine for your species? Oh, Lisa? Yeah, she's pretty strong. Used to be a competitive powerlifter back on Earth before she became an engineer. Jake paused to wave at the woman, who smiled and waved back without interrupting her routine of lifting impossibly heavy objects. She holds the ship's record for deadlifts. Deadlifts? Velran asked weakly. It's when you pick up really heavy things from the ground. Great for building back strength. Jake's explanation was delivered with the same casual tone someone might use to describe the weather. They continued down the corridor, passing what Jake called recreational areas that looked like training grounds for some kind of warrior culture. Humans were engaged in activities that involved rapid movement, complex coordination, and what appeared to be deliberate collision with solid surfaces. Here's our main galley, Jake announced as they entered a large room filled with tables and chairs. The space was warm and inviting, with more of those green plants growing in corners. Several humans looked up from their meals and waved friendly greetings. A woman with dark hair and olive skin approached their group. Like Jake, she moved with an easy confidence that somehow made HFY very nervous. This is Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez, Jake said by way of introduction. Lisa, meet our new friends from the Galactic Survey ship Harmonious Dawn. Pleasure to meet you, Lisa said, extending her hand in the same gesture Jake had used earlier. Jake told us we might have visitors. This is so exciting. We've been wondering what other species were out here. While they talked, Lisa absently picked up a tool that had been left on a nearby table. The casual action made Krinta's scanner emit a soft alarm. The tool in Lisa's hand registered as having the mass of a small vehicle. She was holding it like it weighed nothing at all. Sorry about the mess, Lisa continued, apparently oblivious to the effect she was having on her guests. We've been doing some repairs on the main engine. Had a little trouble with the containment field generators, but nothing we can't handle. Should have everything running at full capacity within a day or two. What kind of repairs? Krinta asked, professional curiosity overcoming her nervousness. Oh, just standard maintenance stuff. Had to replace some of the primary focusing crystals in the reactor core. The radiation levels got a bit high for comfort. Lisa's casual mention of radiation levels that would be lethal to most galactic species made all three visitors take an unconscious step backward. A male human approached their group, wearing what appeared to be medical attire. Jake, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to check on Maya before she heads back to duty. No problem, Alex, folks. This is Dr. Alex Turner, our medical officer. Alex, meet Captain HFY and his team from a galactic survey ship. Dr. Turner nodded politely. Pleased to meet you. Excuse me just a moment. He walked over to a table where a female human was sitting, apparently relaxing after a meal. How are you feeling, Maya? Dr. Turner asked, running some kind of scanning device over the woman. Much better, thanks, Doc. That fight with Rick really got my blood pumping. I think I might have pulled something in my shoulder, but it's feeling fine now. Fight? Velran whispered to Krinta. Dr. Turner nodded approvingly. At his readings. Looks good. The bruising is already fading and the swelling in your ribs has gone down. You should be fine for tomorrow's sparring session. Maya grinned. Great. I've been working on a new combination I want to try out. Rick won't know what hit him. Dr. Turner chuckled. Just try not to break anything important this time. I'm running low on regeneration gel. The casual conversation about injuries that would hospitalize most galactic citizens continued for several more minutes. Zexai found himself wondering what kind of world could produce beings who spoke about violence and injury as if they were discussing the weather. So, Jake said, turning back to his guests, what would you like to know about humanity? We're pretty much an open book. This is our first real voyage beyond our home system, so we're still figuring out this whole space exploration thing. The admission that these impossibly robust beings were newcomers to space travel added another layer of confusion to an already overwhelming situation. Zexai exchanged glances with his crew members, seeing his own bewilderment reflected in their expressions. Perhaps, Zexai said carefully, you could tell us about your home world? About Earth? Jake's face lit up with enthusiasm. Oh, you'd love Earth. It's got everything. Mountains, oceans, deserts, forests. The weather can be a bit unpredictable, but that's part of what makes it interesting. Where are you folks from? As Jake began describing a world that sounded like a catalog of environmental hazards, Zexai realized that their simple first contact mission had become something far more complex and potentially dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The meal that followed was unlike anything the Volanti crew had ever experienced. The humans had prepared what they called a welcome dinner, featuring foods that made Krinta's scanner readings fluctuate wildly. Many of the dishes contained levels of compounds that would be considered toxic to most galactic species, yet the humans consumed them with obvious enjoyment. This is great, Jake said, taking a bite of something he called chili. We don't often get to share our food with new friends. I hope it's not too spicy for you folks. Captain Zexai took a careful taste of the mild soup Lisa had recommended for them. Even this supposedly gentle option made his mouth tingle in ways that suggested his universal translator was working overtime to classify the chemical compounds. It is very interesting, he managed diplomatically. Perhaps you could tell us more about your journey here? Sure thing, replied Tony Martinez, the ship's navigation officer. Tony had joined them for dinner along with several other crew members. We launched from Earth about 6 months ago. This was supposed to be a routine survey mission. Map some star systems, look for interesting planets, maybe find signs of other intelligent life. Where exactly is Earth located? Krinta asked, trying to keep her voice casual while her scanner continued to register impossible readings from every human in the room. Oh, it's in a system you probably call Sool, said Jenny Walsh, the hydroponics specialist. Nice yellow star, third planet out. We've got one natural satellite. We call it the Moon. Beautiful place, really. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest right near the mountains. Mountains? Velren asked. Jenny's face brightened. Oh, you'd love them. Huge rock formations that reach way up into the sky. Some of them are covered with snow year-round. I used to go climbing there when I was younger. Climbing? Krinta's voice carried a note of confusion. Rock climbing, Jenny explained enthusiastically. You use ropes and special equipment to scale vertical rock faces. It's a great workout, and the views from the top are incredible. There's nothing, quite like hanging from a cliff face 1,000 meters above the ground. The three Volanti exchanged horrified glances. What Jenny was describing sounded like elaborate suicide attempts, yet she spoke about it as if it were a pleasant hobby. Tony laughed at their expressions. Jenny's pretty hardcore. I prefer skiing myself. Nothing beats racing down a mountain slope at high speed, dodging trees and rocks. You deliberately travel at high speeds while avoiding obstacles? Zexai asked weakly. The faster the better, Tony grinned. I grew up in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains. Winter sports are a way of life there. The cold really gets your blood moving. Cold? Krinta managed to ask. Oh yeah, temperatures down to -30 or 40 degrees Celsius. Sometimes lower if you get caught in a blizzard. Great for building character. Tony's casual mention of temperatures that would freeze Volanti blood solid was delivered with the same enthusiasm someone might use to describe a pleasant vacation. Doctor, Turner joined the conversation from across the table. Tony's from Hardy Stock. I remember treating him for frostbite twice last winter when he was training for the expedition. Frostbite? Velran's translator was struggling with the concept. Tissue damage from extreme cold exposure, Dr. Turner explained matter-of-factly. Pretty common among winter sports enthusiasts, usually heals up fine with proper treatment. The idea that humans regularly expose themselves to conditions that cause tissue damage, and considered this normal recreation, added another layer to the Volanti crew's growing concern about human psychology. What about you, Dr. Turner? HFY asked, hoping to steer the conversation toward something less alarming. What is your background? I specialized in trauma surgery before joining the space program, Alex replied. Worked in emergency medicine for about 10 years. You see all kinds of interesting cases in that field. Trauma surgery? Krinta asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Emergency medical procedures for severe injuries. Car accidents, industrial incidents, sports injuries, that sort of thing. Humans have a remarkable capacity for surviving damage that would be instantly fatal to most organisms. Alex began describing medical procedures that involve deliberately cutting into living tissue, replacing damaged organs, and repairing what he called compound fractures. The casual way he discussed these procedures suggested they were routine rather than desperate last resort measures. The human body is incredibly resilient, he continued. We can lose significant amounts of blood, survive with reduced oxygen levels, and recover from injuries that completely shut down major organ systems. It's one of the advantages of evolving on a world with such variable conditions. Meanwhile, Jenny was explaining her work in hydroponics to an increasingly disturbed Krinta. We grow our own food during long space flights. It's actually easier than you might think once you understand how plants respond to different environmental stresses. Environmental stresses? Krinta asked. Temperature variations, radiation exposure, chemical imbalances in the growing medium. Plants are tougher than most people realize. Back on Earth, I worked in agricultural research, developing crops that could survive in extreme environments. What kind of extreme environments? Desert regions, Arctic zones, areas with high radiation levels from industrial activity. We had some success with crops that could grow in soil contaminated with heavy metals. Jenny's description of deliberately cultivating life in toxic conditions was delivered with the same pride another species might use to discuss artistic achievements. As the evening progressed, more crew members joined the conversation, each sharing stories that added to the Volanti crew's growing sense of unease. They heard about humans who voluntarily jumped from aircraft at high altitudes, others who explored underwater environments that would crush most species, and still others who chose to live in desert regions where the daytime temperatures could kill unprotected organic life. Security Chief Rick Hamilton arrived near the end of the meal, still wearing exercise clothing and carrying equipment that Krinta's scanner identified as weapons-grade implements. Sorry I'm late, Rick said, setting down what appeared to be metal bars of various weights. Just finished the evening training session with the security team. Training for what? HFY asked, though he was beginning to dread the answer. Standard combat readiness drills. Hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical scenarios. We like to stay sharp in case we run into any hostile situations out here. Rick's casual mention of preparing for violence was accompanied by a friendly smile that somehow made it even more unsettling. Do you expect to encounter hostile situations? Velran asked carefully. Oh, probably not, Rick replied. But it's better to be prepared. Plus, the crew enjoys the competition. We hold tournaments every few weeks. Boxing, wrestling, martial arts demonstrations. Keeps morale up during long flights. The revelation that humans engaged in organized combat for entertainment purposes was the final piece in a puzzle that painted a picture of a species so fundamentally different from known galactic civilizations that meaningful communication seemed almost impossible. As the dinner wound down, Jake stood up and addressed his guests. I hope you folks have enjoyed learning about humanity. We'd love to hear about your civilization and the other species in the galaxy. It sounds like there's a whole community out there we never knew existed. HFY looked at his crew members, seeing his own profound confusion reflected in their expressions. How do you explain to a species of living weapons that the rest of the galaxy considers them terrifyingly dangerous when they clearly think of themselves as peaceful explorers? The cultural exchange was revealing fundamental differences that went far beyond simple biological variation. They were dealing with beings whose entire concept of normal existence was based on surviving conditions that other species used as instruments of warfare. Captain Zexhai excused himself and his crew from the dinner, claiming they needed to report back to their ship. The truth was that he desperately needed time to process what they had learned about humanity. As they made their way back through the Phoenix's corridors, each step confirmed his growing suspicion that they had stumbled into something far beyond normal first contact protocols. Back aboard the Harmonious Dawn, the three Volanti officers gathered in Zexhai's private quarters. Krinta spread her scanner readings across the table, and the data painted a picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about possible life forms. "Captain," Krinta began, her voice tight with barely controlled fear, "I've analyzed the biological data from our visit. These humans are not just adapted to harsh environments, they are living weapons." "Explain," Zexhai ordered, settling into his chair. "Their bone density is 3 times higher than the theoretical maximum for organic life. Their muscle fiber composition shows redundant systems that would allow them to function even after sustaining damage that would kill most species instantly. Their cardiovascular efficiency suggests they can operate at oxygen levels that would cause immediate unconsciousness in any known galactic citizen." Velran pulled up the communication logs from their visit. "Captain, I've been analyzing their language patterns and cultural references. When they speak about their home world, they describe environmental conditions that match our classifications for planetary weapons testing sites." "What do you mean?" Zexhai asked. "They mentioned winter, temperatures that would flash freeze Volanti blood. They described atmospheric pressure variations that would rupture our organs. They spoke casually about radiation levels that our safety protocols classify as immediately lethal." Velran's hands trembled as he continued. "And they do all of this voluntarily, for recreation." Krinta added more disturbing data to their discussion. "The tools I observed them using casually would be classified as military-grade equipment by most galactic governments. That wrench engineer Rodriguez was holding? It has sufficient mass and structural integrity to breach the hull of a standard patrol vessel. Their exercise equipment," Velran continued, "generates force measurements that exceed the destructive capacity of some of our mining explosives, and they use it daily for what they call staying in shape." The implications were staggering. Not only were humans incredibly dangerous by galactic standards, but they seemed completely unaware of it. They treated world-ending environmental hazards as normal background conditions and engaged in activities that other species would consider acts of war. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from the Phoenix. Velran activated the communication system, and Jake Morrison's friendly voice filled the room. "Captain Zexhai, I hope your crew made it back safely. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about galactic civilization. We're really excited about the possibility of meeting other species and learning about the broader community out here." Zexhai struggled to find words. How do you tell someone that their entire species represents a potential threat to galactic stability? "Commander Morrison," he finally managed, "we appreciate your hospitality. However, we need to discuss some concerns with our leadership before proceeding further." "Of course, I understand. These things probably have protocols that need to be followed." Jake's voice remained warm and understanding. "Is there anything we can do to help with the process? We're happy to provide any information you might need." The offer was so innocent, so genuinely helpful, that it made the situation even more complex. These beings weren't monsters or conquerors. They were friendly explorers who happened to be the most dangerous life forms ever encountered. "We may have questions later," Zexhai replied diplomatically. "For now, we need to compile our report." "Sounds good. We'll be here working on our engines if you need anything. Phoenix out." As the communication ended, Krinta pulled up additional analysis results. "Captain, I've been reviewing their casual mentions of Earth's conditions. Based on their descriptions, their homeworld would be classified as uninhabitable by every galactic safety standard. Show me, Zexhai ordered. Temperature variations from below freezing to what they called desert heat. Atmospheric composition that includes free oxygen at concentrations that would be considered explosive in most environments. Geological activity they described as earthquakes and volcanoes that sound like continuous planetary bombardment. And they evolved there naturally? Velron asked in amazement. According to everything they've told us, yes. No technological assistance, no environmental modification. They developed intelligence and technology while adapting to conditions that would sterilize most planets we've encountered. Zexhai stood up and began pacing. This changes everything. If humans are truly representative of Deathworld evolution, then our entire understanding of possible life forms is inadequate. There's more, Captain, Krinta continued reluctantly. I detected traces of what they called medicine in their systems. When I analyzed the chemical compounds, I found substances that would be classified as combat enhancement drugs by military standards. They're using military stimulants? Zexhai asked, alarmed. No, sir. These are routine medical treatments. Pain relievers, infection fighters, nutritional supplements. What they consider basic healthcare includes chemical compounds that would enhance combat effectiveness in most galactic species. The revelation that human medicine was essentially a form of biological warfare preparation added yet another layer to their growing concern. Captain, Velran spoke up. What do we tell Galactic Command? How do we explain that we've discovered a species of friendly, peaceful beings who could accidentally destroy most of known civilization? It was a fair question. Standard first contact. Protocols assumed that dangerous species would be obviously hostile. There were procedures for dealing with aggressive aliens and guidelines for handling primitive civilizations. But there was no protocol for species that were overwhelmingly powerful, yet completely benevolent. They mentioned wanting to join galactic civilization, Krinta observed. What happens when a species that treats planetary disaster conditions as normal weather tries to integrate with beings who require environmental suits to survive on garden worlds? Zexhai considered the cultural challenges. They also mentioned recreational activities that involve deliberate physical conflict. What they call sports would be classified as gladiatorial combat by most galactic standards. And their reaction times, Velran added. Did you see how quickly that female caught the falling tool? Her neural processing speed exceeded our ship's computer response time. The accumulating evidence painted a picture of being so far beyond normal galactic parameters that meaningful integration seemed almost impossible. Yet Jake Morrison and his crew had been nothing but friendly, curious, and eager to learn about their new neighbors. We need to make contact with Galactic Command, Zexhai decided. But we also need to be careful about how we present this information. The last thing we want is to trigger a panic about friendly beings who just happen to be incredibly dangerous. What about the humans? Krinta asked. They're expecting to learn about galactic civilization. How do we explain that most of the galaxy would consider them a military threat just by existing? It was a question that would challenge everything. Both species thought they knew about the possibilities of peaceful coexistence. The friendly humans aboard the Phoenix represented either the greatest opportunity or the greatest challenge in galactic history, and perhaps both at the same time. As Zexhai prepared to compose the most important report of his career, he wondered whether the galaxy was ready to welcome neighbors who casually survived conditions that would destroy entire civilizations. 3 days passed before Zexhai received a response from Galactic Command. The message was brief and direct. Investigate further, establish peaceful relations if possible, and prepare a comprehensive report on human capabilities and intentions. Most importantly, do not take any actions that could be interpreted as hostile. The directive made sense. If humans were as powerful as the initial report suggested, antagonizing them would be catastrophically stupid. But it also placed enormous responsibility on Zexhai's shoulders. He was essentially conducting first contact with a species that could reshape galactic civilization. When he contacted Commander Morrison to arrange another meeting, the human's enthusiasm was immediately apparent. Captain Zexhai, great to hear from you. We've been hoping you'd want to continue our discussions. I've had my crew putting together some information about Earth and human technology that might interest your people. The offer of technological exchange made Zexhi's scales prickle with nervousness, but he managed to keep his voice steady. That would be very helpful, Commander. Perhaps we could arrange for some of our technical specialists to meet with yours. Absolutely. Why don't you bring your whole crew over? We can give you a proper tour of the Phoenix and you can see how we do things. Fair warning, though. We're still working on the engines, so it might be a bit noisy in the engineering sections. A few hours later, Zexhi found himself leading a larger group of Volanti officers aboard the human vessel. In addition to Krinta and Velron, he had brought engineer Kexhi and medical officer Silwen. If they were going to understand humanity, they needed multiple perspectives. Commander Morrison met them at the airlock along with several of his senior staff. Welcome back aboard the Phoenix. I thought we'd start with engineering, since that's where most of our current activity is. Focused. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez led them through sections of the ship that defied conventional understanding. The fusion reactors operated at temperatures that should have melted any known material. The containment fields maintained pressures that exceeded the structural limits of most space stations, and the humans worked in these conditions wearing nothing more than what they called safety equipment. This is our main engine room, Lisa explained, gesturing toward a chamber filled with equipment that hummed with barely contained energy. We're running a standard deuterium fusion system. Nothing too fancy. The Phoenix was designed for long-range exploration, so we prioritized reliability over raw power. Engineer Kexhi stared at his scanner readings in disbelief. Commander Rodriguez, these power output levels would be considered weapons grade by most galactic safety standards. Lisa looked surprised. Really? This is pretty standard for human space travel. We needed enough power to run life support, artificial gravity, and propulsion systems for extended periods. How do other species handle long-range travel? The question revealed a fundamental difference in technological approaches. Most galactic species used low-power systems with extensive recycling and conservation measures. The idea of generating massive amounts of energy and simply containing it was foreign to their engineering philosophy. We use more efficient approaches, Kexhi replied diplomatically. Interesting, Lisa mused. I'd love to learn about those techniques. We're always looking for ways to improve our designs. While the engineers discussed power systems, Dr. Alex Turner was giving Medical Officer Silwen a tour of the ship's medical facilities. The revelations there were equally disturbing. This is our surgical suite, Alex explained, showing off equipment that looked more like a machine shop than a medical facility. We can handle most trauma cases that might come up during a long mission. The regeneration tanks over there can accelerate healing for major injuries. Silwen examined the medical equipment with growing amazement. Dr. Turner, this surgical equipment appears capable of performing procedures that would be impossible for most galactic species to survive. How so? Alex asked, genuinely curious. The power tools, the cutting implements, the reconstruction devices. They're designed to work on tissue that has structural properties similar to manufactured materials. Alex nodded thoughtfully. Well, human bones are pretty dense and our muscle fiber is fairly robust. We need equipment that can handle the workload. What kind of medical challenges do your people face? The conversation that followed revealed the enormous gap between human physiology and that of most galactic species. What humans considered minor medical procedures would be major operations for beings like the Volanti. What humans treated as routine injuries would be fatal trauma for most other known life forms. Meanwhile, Communications Officer Steve Parker was working with Velron to establish better communication protocols between their ships. The process revealed yet another area where humans exceeded galactic norms. Our communication systems use pretty standard electromagnetic radiation, Steve explained, adjusting his equipment. We can handle most frequencies across a wide spectrum. What kind of systems do you folks use? Similar principles, Velron replied, but with much lower power outputs. Your transmission strength would overwhelm most galactic receivers. No kidding. We can dial it back if that would help. We're used to communicating across interstellar distances, so we tend to use more power than might be necessary for ship-to-ship contact. The casual mention of routine interstellar communication suggested technological capabilities that most galactic civilizations were still developing. Humans apparently treated vast distances as minor inconveniences rather than major obstacles. As the technical exchanges continued, a more complex picture of humanity began to emerge. They weren't deliberately trying to be intimidating or superior. They had simply evolved solutions to problems that most other species had never needed to consider. Commander Morrison gathered everyone in the main conference room for what he called a cultural exchange session. The room filled with representatives from both ships, all eager to learn about their new neighbors. "I've been thinking about some of the questions you raised during our first meeting," Jake began. "It sounds like the galaxy has developed some interesting approaches to space travel and civilization that we've never considered." Captain HFY found himself in the unusual position of trying to explain galactic civilization to beings who casually exceeded most of its fundamental assumptions. "The galactic community is built on principles of cooperation and mutual assistance," he explained. "Different species contribute their unique capabilities to benefit everyone." "That sounds wonderful," Jake replied enthusiastically. "What kind of contributions does humanity might be able to make?" The question hung in the air as everyone considered the implications. Humans could potentially solve problems that had challenged galactic civilization for centuries, but their solutions might be so far beyond current capabilities that integration would be nearly impossible. "Perhaps," HFY suggested carefully, "we could start with small cooperative projects, joint research initiatives, cultural exchange programs, that sort of thing." "Absolutely," Jake agreed. "We'd love to learn from your experiences, and if there's anything we can help with, just let us know." The offer was sincere and well-meaning, but HFY couldn't help wondering what would happen when galactic problems encountered human solutions. Would other species be ready for assistance that exceeded their entire technological base? As the meeting continued, both sides began to understand that successful integration would require patience, careful planning, and a willingness to challenge fundamental assumptions about what was possible. The Phoenix and the Harmonious Dawn spent the next several days in close cooperation, with technical teams working together on projects that benefited both vessels. Slowly, a framework began to emerge for how humanity might fit into the broader galactic community. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of mutual bewilderment. But for the first time since detecting the mysterious Deathworld ship, Captain HFY began to believe that the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. As he prepared his final report to Galactic Command, recommending that humanity be welcomed as potential members of galactic civilization, HFY reflected on how first contact had become something far more significant. The beginning of a new era where the impossible had become merely improbable.